some of the most awesome metal detector finds from around the world. Boot of Cortez. Even though deserts may look barren, they might be rich in valuable metals, such as one lucky metal detectorist discovered in 1989. One day, a would-be amateur treasure hunter in Sonora, Mexico headed over to Radio Shack and bought a relatively cheap metal detector just to play around and see what they could find. After a few days of nothing, they would stumble upon a hot spot. Expecting to find yet another piece of junk, the novice could simply not believe their eyes, because what they dug up was a 26.6-pound nugget of gold, which eventually earned the name the Boot of Cortez. This fantastic find was the largest piece of gold to have ever been found in the Western Hemisphere. The Boot of Cortez was then auctioned off for more than $1.5 million. This should lead anyone to be inspired to head over to their local Radio Shack, Best Buy, to pick up a metal detector today. Rest in peace, Radio Shack. Torque Finds. If you're looking for more inspiration, here's another story of a guy that bought a random metal detector and then hit the jackpot. One day, a 35-year-old man named Dave Booth bought a metal detector. And then, just 5 days later, he went on his first treasure hunt in Stirlingshire, Scotland. Within 1 hour of searching around, he would stumble upon necklaces made of copper, gold, and silver. These necklaces turned out to be ancient and were called torques, theorized to be at least 2,000 years old. And where were they hiding, you may ask? Well, turns out they were just a half of a foot below the surface. When he had them appraised, they just so happened to be worth $500,000. We would like to call this awesome find beginner's luck. An antique gold chalice. The next time that you go out to the beach, you might want to bring along a metal detector. That's because in 2008, Mike DeMar was searching for treasure along the coast of Key West when he literally struck gold. It's no shock that tons of trash, especially aluminum cans, will wash up on the shore quite frequently. And so he thought that his detector had just spotted another piece of junk. As he was digging it up, he couldn't exactly tell what it was and thought that it may be just a beer can. But boy, was he wrong. When he pulled it out of the sand, he realized that he had just found a solid gold goblet, one that weighed nearly a pound. After having it analyzed and appraised, it turned out that this chalice was 385 years old and was dropped from a ship called the Santa Margarita that sank in 1622. But here's the big question. How much was it worth? Well, as it turns out, it was a whopping $1 million. Not too bad for a day at the beach. By the looks of it, your chance of becoming rich while getting some sun appears to be a little bit higher than your chances of winning the lottery, so you may want to go and get your tan on. Anglo-Saxon treasure. Now, you don't necessarily have to head to the beach or even spend hours in the scorching desert in order to find some great treasure. One man would find everything he'd been looking for right in his own backyard. One day in 2009, a man by the name of Terry Herbert decided to give his farmland, located in Staffordshire, England, a once-over with his metal detector. But little did he know that when he acquired the land, he was also given the deal of a lifetime. On day one, he uncovered just a few interesting finds, but within 5 days, he had found enough golden artifacts to fill up 244 bags. That's when he knew that he was onto something. After more searching and more digging, he would find approximately 3,500 pieces of artifacts, things that ranged from garnet to silver and gold, which, when put together, would have created hundreds of complete relics from the early Anglo-Saxon period. This find would come to be known as the Staffordshire Hoard and was valued at approximately $5.3 million. And to think, it was just sitting in his backyard the whole time. Hidden cash. Speaking of things to find in your backyard, that might not be the best spot to actually hide your stolen cash. Many suspected that one of the post office employees had been stealing money out of the government for years. So, postal inspectors jumped at the first chance they could to figure out if their suspicions were true. In 1946, after borrowing a metal detector from the U.S. Army, they began searching the property of one of their employees. Sure enough, when they scanned the backyard, their metal detector went off. And after digging 9 feet down, they found jars, cans, and even a stovepipe that was full of thousands of dollars of cash. $153,150 to be exact. Fortunately for the guy, he was dead before they ever got a hold of him. The Ringlemer Cup. Sometimes your hobbies can make you rich, like in the case of Cliff Bradshaw. In 2001, Cliff, a retired electrician, had always loved archaeology and metal detecting, so that's when he decided to make a hobby out of it. One day, while he was scanning a field in East Kent, England, he would find a crumpled up piece of metal. However, it wasn't just any mangled metal object. It was a gold goblet from the Bronze Age that dated anywhere from 1700 to 1500 BC. As it turns out, there are only 6 others like it in the world, with this one being the second one found in Britain. Not only are these chalices valuable ancient finds, but they also reveal a lot about history. For example, some of the other similar-looking goblets from that era were found near the Mediterranean, which alludes to the fact that the Cornish and the Greek had close ties. A British museum would buy up the crushed gold chalice from him for $520,000, and being the great guy that he is, he would split it with the family who owned the land where the chalice was found. I mean, who really needs to save up for retirement when you have a metal detector? Roman remains. Sometimes when you're digging up ancient artifacts, you're bound to find the unexpected. Metal detectorists Dave Darby and Alan Standish were scanning a site that was known to yield valuable artifacts, but they were not prepared for what they actually found. After receiving a signal from their detector, they began digging, and shortly after, they would stumble upon bones. In order to keep on digging, they needed a special license, and in addition to obtaining the license, they would also bring along a team to help them excavate. As it turns out, they had uncovered 2 graves, and the metal detector actually picked up a shield that was buried with a man who was said to be from the 5th century. The second grave was that of a teenage girl that dated to the 6th century. Then, over the course of 10 years, volunteers would dig up 6 rings, 20 brooches, 650 coins, 32,000 animal bones, and 20,000 pot fragments at the same location. However, none of those finds would ever be as amazing as the ancient grave sites. Roman coins. Now, what's better than finding a skeleton from the Roman era? Well, finding their stash of cash, of course. In 2009, 30-year-old newbie metal detectorist Nick Davies was on his very first metal detecting adventure, looking for hidden gems. And that's when he heard the sound of treasure beeping from his detector. After he began digging, he then realized that he had unearthed a clay pot. However, it was extraordinarily heavy, weighing in at over 70 pounds. One peek inside the pot, and he knew that he had found a fortune. That's because approximately 10,000 bronze and silver coins from the Roman era were jam-packed inside. And that made it the largest collection of Roman coins ever found in the area. An analysis of the collection, which then became known as the Shrewsbury Hoard, dated the coins back to between 320 and 340 AD. Some of which appear to be coins made in honor of the anniversary of the founding of Rome and Constantinople. Now, considering that Nick didn't have permission to actually be on that stretch of land in the first place, he, by law, was actually not entitled to any of the reward. But there's no word on whether he received a cut. However, there is a takeaway. If you're going to search for treasure, make sure that you know the rules, because it isn't always a finder's keeper's game. And